Welcome to another episode.
In this episode, we're going to talk about backcountry camping through Shenandoah. We're going to do a little bit of fire starting. We're going to set up our campsite from the backpack. We're going to talk about some food. We're going to do a little bit of fishing and more.
So stick around. If you're wondering why it took me so long to make an episode this time, I'll go ahead and tell you. Tried to go to Shenandoah and got my ass kicked. So we went in super prepared, drove up in there, had everything we needed to stay overnight, maybe 2 nights. And as soon as we arrived, we got nailed with sleet and rain, and it was going to be going for hours. So we ended up retreating, and I'm coming back here to reevaluate the bag and put some new things in it to kind of help us get through even that situation if we end up going back. So
there are also a lot of rules and regulations that we have to follow that I wasn't aware of at first. But for now, let's just find a campsite. Now that we found a spot, let's go ahead and get set up. So today I brought with me everything that I plan on taking with me on my next venture to Shenandoah, this time being much more prepared for the weather. Most of the pack is the same, but I did add some additional food storage and some extra sleepwear. Now that we have everything unpacked, let's go ahead and get this tent set up. This is a rather cheap tent. It actually doesn't weigh very much, and it's very easy to set up. I'll leave a link in the description.
So with doing backcountry camping in Shenandoah, they don't really allow you to have fires. Since we can't start fires, I'm not going to be using this brand new Ferro Rod that I got. We're going to be using a stove for most of everything that I'm doing.
But for the sake of the episode, we're going to do fire today anyway. And foraging for today is pine cones.
So we know I've been talking about deciduous trees quite a bit lately. So I think today is a good time to start on some tips you can utilize coniferous trees. Right? You know, you see them everywhere. We want to find one that looks pretty fresh and dry. Pine cones are a really good way to tell if it's really humid outside or not, because whenever they're wet, they close up, and whenever they're dry, they stay open like this. It's kind of a really neat trick. It looks like they're all pretty dry, so these are going to work for what I'm trying to show you today.
Something else you can utilize pine cones for is this really cool torch. Utilize your knife to split the stick, and then use the bottom of the pine cone. Use the knife to spread the stick apart just enough to fit the pine cone in, and it'll clamp down. It'll hold itself together, and it's really easy to switch to another pine cone. This is basically a natural torch that you can use if you don't have a headlamp. It's easier if you have a fire, but I just wrapped some Spanish moss around it to get it started. Once the pine cone started burning, I had about 5 to 6 minutes of light. I won't be able to use this in Shenandoah because of the fire hazard, but you might be able to in a survival situation.
The really cool tip about pine cones is if you see a lot of them on the ground, typically it takes about 2 years for a pine cone to fully develop and fall. So that means they've had 2 years of great weather conditions. That's pretty much all it tells you.
Back to our site and starting this fire, I'm going to use this standing up dead tree as dry wood. When you're starting a fire and there's no rocks and there's a lot of foliage around, it's good to dig your hole deep enough so that you can pile the dirt on top of the fire when you're finished.
Make sure you have some water.
As an extra measure, you're going to want to make sure you put out the coals. Let's go ahead and get this fire started with this new Ferro Rod. I'll leave a link to this also in the description. If you're struggling with getting a fire, I recommend checking some of the previous episodes out, and I'll show you a really cool trick with the Ferro Rod to get your fire started easier. But now, let's move to the sleeping system and show you the new comfort item that I've added to the bag. This is an air mattress. It's very lightweight, and it was actually pretty cheap. Of course, I'll leave the link in the description. It doesn't come with an air pump, but you can blow it up, and you can also use this little foot press thing to air it up. It takes a minute, but it works.
So, since we're going to be backcamping Shenandoah, one of the rules in backcountry is you have to have a permit. For one, you need to tell them your itinerary, where you're going to be, what day, different things like that. You fill out your information, and then you just kind of put it in your dashboard. So when you park there, they can see where you are. You also want to make sure somebody else knows where you are. Tell somebody your plan, at least. Say, hey, if you haven't heard back from me in about 2 weeks or so, you know, maybe couple days, however long you plan on going. I'm going for 48 hours maximum. So that means if you haven't heard from me in 72 hours, maybe you should go look. Another option you have is you can buy a GPS, a satellite phone or something like that. They're about $300 to $500. Some get up there to be over $1,000. So they can be pretty expensive. Once you've got your permit, you've told somebody where you're going to be, and you have a good plan and route, you're ready to go.
Also going to want to have plenty of food rations. Almost double what you think you need. Today we're going to do a really simple meal that only requires boiled water. This is one of those backpack meals that you find. It's called Adventure Meal. And this is the chicken flavor. All you have to do is open it, pull out this packet, add boiling water, and then let it sit. I'm going to use the rest of the water for the tea. It reminds me of astronaut food. It's really dry, but then when you add the water, it expands, and it's actually pretty good. I'd probably give it about a 7 out of a 10. Let's go ahead and try some fishing. Today I'm just using a bobbing rig with a worm, like usual, but I also brought a second pole with me. Keep an eye on that bobber for me. Looks like we caught one. This is a bluegill. Bluegills have these barbs, so whenever you handle it, you want to be very careful, comb them down, and then get the hook out. We're not really trying to get bluegill here. We more want trout or some bass or something. But my options are limited, so I'm going to try this jig. We're not having any luck. The water looks pretty murky. Let's take a look. You can see the visibility is pretty cloudy. You have to be on the bottom to really see anything. Or about a foot in front of your face. So I think I'm going to stick with the stinky worm bobber. Looks like something smelled it.
That's a big one for a bluegill.
But we're not really after bluegill. So if that's all we're catching, I think we're done today. But let's move on to the next thing. There's plenty of water where I'm at right now. But let's look at an option if there wasn't any water around at all. This is a grapevine. There is a wide variety of vines, and some of them are poisonous. so make sure you have a grapevine. Grapevines typically stand on their own and kind of hang down. They have a little bit of a bark. Here's the trick. Take a knife, cut about 30 to 45 degrees down. Once you got your first cut, make a second one horizontally until you start to get a little bit of a drip. It's going to take quite a long time to collect water this way, but if you just set a cup aside in the morning, then by the time the afternoon hits and you're ready to make lunch, you'll probably have quite a bit of water. Here's one of those vines I was talking about that's not a grapevine. This is English ivy. It's pretty popular, and you may have seen it before. It has these star-shaped leaves, and it hugs right on the tree. So it's pretty easy to distinguish that this is not a grapevine. The other one is poison ivy. Leaves of 3, leave it be. And then this one, the old if it's hairy, it's scary. This is poison oak. You do not want to mess with that, let alone drink it. The day is coming to an end, and it looks like we have everything we need for our trip. Start by putting this fire out, and then gathering everything to our bag. There may be a few subtle differences when I actually get there, and I'll be sure to share all of that in the next episode. It's going to be a long one. There, now we got everything packed up. Let's go ahead and get this tent, which is actually really easy to pack up. Just remember that it's easier to push the rods through than it is to pull them. There, now that we're packed up, we're going to make sure there's no remnants of us being here. If you have any trash, make sure your fire's covered.
I really appreciate you sticking with me until the end of the episode. If you're wondering what to watch while waiting for episode 7, be sure to give XY on the Fly a chance. It's a male podcast. It's a buddy of mine from the Navy and his father talking about everyday life situations that you or myself may have, and things they've done, the mistakes they've made, and how they got over them, and how they still have a great relationship regardless. Really looking forward to episode 7, and more importantly, I'm looking forward to season 2. Season 2 is going to be on a whole other level, and there's only 2 more left after this one in this season, so it's coming up.
We'll see you there.